Well, and I found it even working in the design field. It's a lot of times the solutions to a product design doesn't come from the same person who's sat there and designed product X for 20 years. I mean, not that they're bad, like they still create new things, but when you throw a toy designer into, some other product, medical device, they just have such a different background and a different way of thinking about things. And when you do that, it's to the point my team, I always move them around. I
Yes.
don't let anybody sit on one, like, oh, you're just going to do this type of project, because it allows you to pull in these different thought processes, and people can go, oh, well, here's a solution. And, the main team would never have figured it out because they've stared
Yes.
at it too long. And
Yes.
it's just not, it's
There's a,
harder and
there's,
harder to solve once you sit at a problem too long. And it's just,
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's even of course the other elephant in the room, if I may say, is the customer, and the key here is that when you're innovating, it's fundamentally about the customer. Is about trying to understand the customer needs, wishes, likes, pain points, and I mean, who knows that better than the people who are really at the front line facing the customer on a daily basis? So I think I found out that there are like basically two major gaps to close to stimulate innovation. One is the gap and the distance that exists between the would-be innovators in the company. Like in big companies would be the scientists and the engineers and the R&D people and the people who know about the customers. And these are typically people in sales, in marketing, let's say people who are at the branch if you're a bank. So these are people, and these people very often work in silos. So the people who are facing the customers, they see things, and it's so important for them to be able to relate this back to the engineers. And again, if I wanted to kind of maybe volunteer an example, I could mention about. I mean, I'll take only one example from Bayer. It was, and I'll explain also where it came from structurally, because it sounds so obvious and so simple that people say, why don't companies do this more? But this was about a product called Basotect. It's a foam. It's a foam that BASF has used for ages for construction, in construction business, to for like sound and heat
insulation
proofing.
foam.
Yes, insulation. It's used for insulation.
Okay, yeah.
In construction in buildings. So it's just a foam for that, and the way this happened is that at some point there was a team trying to sell this product it happened to be actually a Japanese construction company. So they were there on the table, and with the blueprints on the table, discussing different things, and at some point accidentally somebody spilled a cup of coffee on the blueprints. And one of the German salesperson kind of inadvertently kind of grabbed whatever he could that was close, and it was a slab of Basotect foam, and he wiped the coffee. He wiped the coffee, and the coffee was all gone and all that. But then he kind of noticed that when he was doing that, it also wiped the ink on the blueprints. So he kind of thought this is kind of strange. Right. So he, but you see, what is important here, and this is the turning point, is that when he went back, he had noticed he had seen something that nobody had told him about or nobody knew about, and then he explicitly made a call to the R&D people. And he went to see the R&D people and to explain what he had seen, that there was maybe a property that we didn't know about this foam, and actually it became the start to an exercise that the R&D people started, and then they went to see P&G actually. And in the end, to cut the story short, it became a product that many people have in their kitchen. It's called the Magic Cleaner. I mean, you might have seen this
Yes.
foam, this white
Yeah,
foam.
the white foam,
Yes.
the
Yes.
magic eraser you scrub off walls. And
yes, so this is where it came from. It was a totally serendipitous accident where and the foam is still used for insulation, but it developed a completely new business for P&G and of course BASF as a provider. But the important thing is to realize why that happened, and that happened because upstream beforehand, BASF had invested in a unit called Perspective that was used to train people, and then train people systematically in concepts and techniques focused on customer centricity and innovation. So you see, the sales guy and the R&D people had all been gone through this type of training, and it had created a completely different mindset, a different attitude. In the old days, the salesperson would have seen this problem, this foam erasing thing, would have said, "Oh, this is really strange," and then would go on trying to sell the foam, and would never contact the R&D people. So I think this is what I mean by closing the gap between the would-be innovators and the people who are facing the customer. So that's an internal challenge, by the way, because they work so much in silos. And I think the second gap that needs to be closed is the gap, the distance between, let's say, the organization and the customer. And everybody in some ways, not only the salespeople, but they need to learn how to focus on the customer and to listen to what I call three things. One, they have to learn how to listen to the voice of the customer. I mean, it's really clear that very often when people are engaged with their customer, they are very often in what I call a tell mode or a sell mode. They have a solution, they have an understanding or an interpretation of what the customer needs, and they basically trying to sell that solution to the customer. So to really be able to innovate, you have to switch. And again, there's tools, there are techniques to help people learn how to do that, but you have to switch from a tell mode to a listen mode, where you really listen to the customer with empathy, try to understand what is the problem they're trying to solve, very often beyond what your product is offering. Try to understand that problem. The second one is learn to listen to what I call the silence of the customer. And the silence of the customer is kind of the things that they don't tell you. They don't necessarily volunteer or don't tell you, and they don't tell you not because they're trying to hide something from you, but it's either because they don't know themselves, or they might know of a problem, but they won't tell you because they don't think it's your job to fix it. Because and here I can relate to an example, again, that will kind of give some sort of an image to your audience, is the way that Philips, the consumer electronics and company in Holland, that's the way they developed a new kettle that had a lime scale filter. The first lime scale filter kettle was developed by Philips, and the way it happened is that they had a project team working on the design of a new kettle, and at that time they had decided to send some of the team members to live. I mean, this was in the UK. They were targeting the UK market because their market share had completely kind of plummeted, and they were trying to revive their presence in the UK market. So they sent a few people to actually live in some families, and it took only a few days for some people to come back to the team and start to explain what they had seen. They had noticed that people were had a hard time dealing with the lime scale that starts floating in because there was a lot of calcium in the water. So when people were preparing for tea, they were struggling with the lime scale problem in the tea. And this is obviously a problem that they knew about, and the reason is because they saw people trying to scoop the lime scale with their spoon, to get it out of the tea.
Right.
But the customer never told them about this problem. But why? Because if they had a problem with the lime scale, they would complain to the kettle manufacturer. They complained to the water authorities.
Right. That's where you would think to
That's where you would
right?
think, and it took only a few weeks and months to file for the patent. But Philips came up with the first. I mean, you can check your kettles now. Most kettles have this little filter at the mouth that kind of stops most of the lime scale when you're trying to pour the boiling water into your cup of tea. So this is a good example of what I call the silence of the customer. I mean, the customer wouldn't tell you because they don't know, or they don't think they should tell you, but you have to, I call it, you have to find out about their needs in spite of them. In spite of them. And also, this is what I call the weak signals. This is not a big signal that everybody is bragging about. This is a weak signal. And if you allow me, the third thing that you need people to learn how to deal with the customers is the whole area of non-customers. And the non-customers, I mean, people always think is the customers you couldn't have, the customers from your competitors. But as a matter of fact, when you are in any kind of business, you have a whole ecosystem around you. You have your direct customer. In B2B, you might have your customers' customers, you have suppliers, you have influencers, you have regulators, you have prescribers, you have a whole ecosystem of agents who can influence your customer's decision, or even become potential customers for you. And here I thought of telling you about the story about the cement companies that is part of the companies that I talk about. It's an Irish company called Ecosem. So you might know that the construction company uses a lot of cement, and the big kind of market share is for a cement called Portland cement, and it has a very high, very high carbon footprint. And
yeah, it's a major problem.
Major. It's maybe one of the most biggest contributors to the warming effect. Actually, the cement company.
Yeah, I've seen some reports.
Right, and Ecosem kind of identified a new cement. It's called GGBS, ground granulated blast furnace slag. So this is something that exists. It's a technology that exists, but the cement company is not necessarily motivated to put it in place. It has a much lower carbon footprint. As a matter of fact, it produces 32 kilos of CO2 emissions per ton, when the regular cement produces 800 kilos. So this is
20x decrease.
Yes, and of course, it's not that technology is not there, but the problem is that the cement company is an oligopoly. It's an oligopoly. It's dominated by a few very large firms that have invested in this regular traditional cement, and for them to change to adopt this new technology is something that they're postponing. In a sense, they are aware of the problem. They're getting the pressure from the customers, because the construction companies know that the end customers, the customers are very sensitive to these issues. But this is an interesting thing about how Ecosem focused on non-customers to create an innovation. And let me tell you what they did. Is that they tried to, so Ecosem is a leader in this GGBS, ground granulated blast furnace slag. So two aspects to it. One is that it's lower in carbon footprint, but at the same time, it's built from a residue from the steel mills. So this is a leftover. Yeah. So this is actually recycling the leftovers from steel mills. So it is a fantastic, technology. It has the same level of performance, if not better than and quality than the regular Portland cement. But of course, the established players, they're just kind of poo-pooing all the time this product, with the customers. So when Ecosem, who is a leader in GGBS cement, tries to approach the customers, they get always rejected, because the dominant players, they just kind of criticize and block all this all the time. So what his name is Donald O'Ryan, the founder of Ecosem, realized is that the problem might not be the customers, because the customers want environmentally kind of, advanced cement. It's the competitors. And then he identified the regulators. So what he did is that he explained, and it's explained a little bit in the book, he spent almost 4 years trying to convince the regulatory bodies to look at GGBS technology. He lobbied for them to convince them to include in their commissions some people who would be knowledgeable about GGBS technology. It took him 4 years to get the regulators to actually include people who would know about GGBS. And it took him that long to actually have these, in France, for instance, the regulatory bodies to accept GGBS as a high quality cement that is legitimate in the industry. And this is where the growth for Ecosem started. And the important thing here, if you will, is that the innovation was not focused on the customers. The innovative idea was by focusing on the regulators. So this is what I call the non-customers. You don't need to always focus on just a technology, because they had the technology, but to unlock the market was to unlock the market with the regulators through processes of explanation, training, educating the regulators. So I think these are real challenges for organizations, is to, again, get everybody to understand that innovating is part of their job, to give them permission, to create time and space for them. And then, of course, most people will tell you, I'm not R&D, I'm not a creative person. Then you
just clean things.
Yes, then you have to kind of give them a few, just like we were talking about the gym, with a few equipment, a few dumbbells, a few bars, you just kind of teach them how to, with, tools that are simple, intuitive, very often the ones that I have in the book, for instance, are very visual, and kind of gradually teach everybody how to listen to the voice of the customer, to the silence of the customer, and sometimes to pay attention to these non-customers that are floating around.
Right. Well, this is great. This is very important to be looking at all those areas, because I feel like you're right on the money. Like we have such a narrow idea of innovating, and you're really pulling out. You're like, no, we can do more innovating if you kind of pull your blinders off. Really, is what you're doing. Is like take your blinders
Absolutely.
off,
Yes.
actually look at what's happening, look at the inputs, feedback, and start kind of democratizing in a way, especially inside big companies. And I feel like it's a theme of these. We've had these silos, right? We're very good
Yes.
as humans. We're very good at creating boxes and then sticking
Yes.
everyone and everything into it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's
By the way, yeah, and the boxes are not only internal, but they're only external. Like now you mentioned about the boxes, we even create boxes between firms. I mean, this is another interesting example of BASF. Because they've been focusing on the customers and learned how to work with the customers in a different way, they've been able to completely change the business model. I mean, a great example is how they work with the automakers. Again, I'll tell you what was a traditional way. The traditional way they were working, this is the paint and coating business for BASF. So they used to provide coating material and paint to their car customers, on demand. Basically, they receive the order. This was a very commodity business. These automakers thought that they knew better, so they would order, and then they put all these chemical companies in competition and get the best price. But then what happened is that BASF started to work with a few of their customers and try to have a closer partnership. And they realized that, as a matter of fact, like for instance, with Mercedes-Benz, these car manufacturers, they don't know much about coating. They don't know much about paint. They know how to design and assemble cars and sell them, and build a brand. But when it comes to coating, how to even choose the colors, and how, more importantly, to apply the coating and the paints to the metal without having kind of too much waste and be environmentally inefficient and ineffective. They didn't know that. The ones who know about coating are the chemical companies. So they started to actually work closer. And in the first stage, they created a new type of relationship where the engineers at the coating company would get involved earlier in the stage of designing a car to help the car manufacturers choose the best coating for the product that they were trying to put in the market. And they would also get their quality and operations engineers to go on the plants of the car manufacturers to teach them how to apply the coating and the paint in a much more environmentally friendly, less safer also for the workers, to help them save on the coating. So that was like a big revolution for the industry. And now the latest innovation they have come to is that now the car manufacturers, they give full responsibility. They completely, in a sense,
totally passed it on.
Pass it on. You say, they tell them now, you're responsible of the coating and paint, and you do what you have to do because you know much better than us about it. So you can see that creating innovation, this is not a product innovation. This is not a technology innovation.
Right,
it's an
all
innovation I mean, people call it business model or how they work. And by working together, by shifting responsibility, I mean, in changing the form and the limits of the box, basically, they change the box where now in the car companies, there's this chemical company that has taken a whole process, responsibility for a whole process. You have completely interpenetration of processes and structures, and that is saving them not only in terms of cost, getting them better quality, but it is doing a lot of saving in terms of bad chemicals out there. So I think this is a very interesting example also where innovation is not only where you think, it can be in the way that you work with your partners.
Right. Well, I think people still, a lot of companies still struggle with that, of the idea of I must own everything, right? The idea of, oh, well, it all has to be me, and yet it's not, oftentimes it's not the best way to work. If you're, if you're in a specialized area, you should have somebody that's specialized. And that's how I run at my design firm. We do lots of things, but I don't have an engineer try to figure out how to do graphic design. Like that never works out really well for anybody when you're trying to have one person, or even one team, be this all-encompassing expert. Especially cars are complicated. There's a lot of specialties that go into a car. So you wouldn't want your engine designer to be designing, the interior of the car, for example. You don't want that. I mean, you maybe have them give some input, like let them put their brain towards solving some problems, but that they shouldn't be responsible for it.
Right.
And I think, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of that bare example of putting it out there is that people, when you aren't directly responsible for the exact outcome, you can put out ideas that might seem a little weird, might seem a little bit out there, but those are sometimes the ideas where somebody else goes, that's the fix. That's how we actually fix it. But it removes that direct, oh, my job is tied to me coming up with the right answer, and I need to work in this really highly known zone.
And that's really the result, in a sense. What you're talking about is, as you said earlier as well, is really the result of these organizations that we've built over decades, over centuries, that are really geared towards execution. And it's all about efficiency. It's all about control. And when you think about it from a purely theoretical point of view, the best organizations for that are hierarchical. The best organizations are hierarchical. You know what you have to do. You just have to, have a division of labor, division of responsibility, specialized people in what they do, and create these vertical silos. But for innovation, that is because these vertical structures are very good at what I call problem solving. Because you get the best people, the specialists, to solve the problem, which you kind of already know, or you have already influenced the definition of that problem. But innovation, in a sense, because you don't know what it's going to be, is not about problem solving, is about problem finding.
Yes.
It's about finding how many new problems can you solve for the customer that you didn't know before, because then your execution engine is going to be very efficient at solving the problem once you give them the new problem. So the challenge is to find new problems. And this is where exactly what you were talking about, diversity is essential. Diversity, people coming from different departments, different backgrounds, different sensitivities, and there it can't be just the scientists who have it all. So you need to bring people from all sorts of places, and it has a very interesting effect that I've seen in many companies, is that once you create, you give people, everybody, the permission and the space to be engaged in innovating activities. It doesn't have to be a full-time job. These people have the execution job.
Right. It could be 10 minutes you spend on a platform looking through, if you have I have an idea for that. Look at that.
Exactly. And what the effect is that it completely motivates people. It gives them fun in their job. They feel that they can contribute to the future of the company. I think it is very motivating for a lot of people.
I wonder if it really helps with employee engagement.
Absolutely.
If it helps you to because you're more a part of it, right? You're really being able to influence the company and be able to put more of you and be able to solve problems instead of staring there, seeing a problem, knowing you have the solution, but you shouldn't say anything because it's not your.
Absolutely. I think once people, understand you know, and this is where middle management is important in explaining that. But once employees understand that they have a job to do, and this is something that they understand, but at the same time, there's a desire that the senior level management and their boss wants their ideas. I mean, it's always amazing how people are very good at doing their job, but that suddenly they get out of the house and they get out of the office and they become suddenly very creative, you know, outside of the office, helping with the kids, helping with the community, doing all sorts of things that are really creative. It's almost as if as soon as they walk the door of the office, they turn off this innovating muscle. So that power is there latent, and it's a question of really giving permission to people, not only permission to use it, but tell them that you want it, you need it. And of course they'll have crazy ideas, they'll have good ideas, bad ideas, but at least they know that it is something that the boss wants from them. And when they do, they're getting recognized for that. I think this is really the important thing. It's not to kill that energy. And of course, they might need, you know, a few tools, a few frameworks to help them think about, learn how to do innovation. And again, this is a new skill. This is a new skill for them where they can express themselves. And I think that engagement, quality of work life is improved. I've seen it, it's mentioned in the book, some people who actually left their companies because they had a great idea and it was rejected, and then they went to another company that you know, now you will see more and more companies use as a way to attract talent, use this notion that they are able to not only express their creativity, but also to enhance it and to use it to contribute to the company. I think this is a very important way to keep talent, especially the new generation talent.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really important. Like I feel like we're moving to this zone, and we can see it in job shifts and stuff where there's a much more focus on creativity. People want the creativity. They want an outlet to it. They don't, you know, the idea of sitting in a manufacturing job isn't really exciting to, especially the latest generation coming through that's not really utilizing them. And so I think this plays into that as well, of like, okay, how do we make it so that we can be more creative? Because that's, you know, we can roboticize and automate most things, really, but except for this, we can't. This is something that is special to us as humans. That we come up, we're very creative. We come up with all kinds of things, and you know, we'll build a robot to do it or whatever. But we have to come up with the ideas, and having this kind of platform is really important to allow that to happen, which is really great. Last thing to wrap this all up, but I'd love for you to expand a little bit, because you've worked in different cultures, you studied Japanese business, and that's been, you know, something we've all talked about, of how efficient and how they've been able to keep running for long. They have some of the oldest companies that have existed for the longest duration. What kind of elements have you pulled from in all this research that really helped you with this study of innovation? Is there any key things and takeaways that you can share about that you've discovered through all of your research?
You mean from Japan specifically?
Yeah, Japan, or you've been in a few different cultures, and we all have, you know, we all have our different mentalities, right? And a lot of us, we sit in our own zone. We're all siloed in our own culture and our own country. So I'm curious about your perspective on how.
Yeah, I think what is interesting is that you remember when we started the whole the discussion of the whole narrative of the innovation coming from the, let's call it the outlier, you know, the individual genius, and there's some sort of a cultural narrative in many countries. I mean, prominently in the US, Anglo-Saxon world, European world, where we glorify, like you said, the Einstein of the world, or the the Elon Musk of the world, and in a sense, we do have educational systems, we have family structures, cultural structures, institutional systems that kind of make it easy for that kind of type of innovation. As I said, there's a huge potential in the rest of the people, because these people are innovative, but they don't necessarily have a voice, and there's no mechanism for that. And in an interesting way, very often in Asia, like countries like Japan or Korea that we know quite well, South Korea, the cultural context is not necessarily creating these unique geniuses. This is not in the cultural norms. This is not in the cultural mechanism. This is not the objective of the educational system, if you will, or the way that the relationship between the industry and the educational system work. But they're very strong in processes. They're very strong in so we knew for the Japanese, for instance, they taught us everything about quality management. They taught us a lot about manufacturing processes. It's really about getting everybody involved, and having a process to help people do what they do. And I think a lot of the ideas, the new ideas about innovation, are very much inspired or anchored in what we can learn from these firms, that actually everybody can innovate if you give them some tools that it's not only the genius who knows them just by, I don't know, by infusion or whatever, but these are things that can be taught, that you can have embedded processes that people follow on a regular basis. It's not the same type of innovation. It's more kind of continuous, systematic innovation, but it is something that people who are not naturally creative can learn. It's again, the sports analogy can work here, where you take regular people and you teach them how to do certain activity, train them, give them tools, make it a habit. Out of that, by the way, you might have a few geniuses pop up, but there's no guarantee. And that's kind of what I learned from Japan and looking at companies like Samsung. I mean, you could see that the way that Apple has succeeded in the early days with the genius type of breakthrough and industry revolutionizing kind of innovations a la Steve Jobs, and the way that Samsung, for instance, has been able to be very successful. I mean, they've been very successful at continuous innovation. And you could even argue that the new Apple hasn't come with any kind of new breakthrough, but they've been extremely successful nevertheless. And I would argue innovative, but innovative in a different way, in a different manner.
Right.
And same thing for Amazon, for that matter. We've had we'd have Jeff Bezos, and now we have a different type of leadership and different type of innovation engine. Right.
That makes sense. It is such an interesting thing culturally to see with that difference, and it's all innovating, right? We're still innovating. It's just a different approach to it. So,
right. And it's about learning from each other. I mean, as we know, yes, a lot of Asians are coming to Silicon Valley to try to learn about one type of innovation, and we're here trying to learn about the other type. So,
well, collectively, if we mix them, maybe we can find the best way to innovate, which I think is
absolutely
really
absolutely. This is what it is about. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I really appreciate you taking time to get on this podcast. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you.
And for anyone that's looking for the book, we're going to have link in the description, everything built to
Okay.
innovate. It's out. So please, if you're interested in this, it would be great. Check out the book, get it. And yeah, any last words, thoughts you want to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, as you said, there's a website for the book, and we for people who want to know to get new information, additional information. We started a blog with different posts that go beyond what is in the book, kind of maybe sometimes deeper in some topics, and of course we'd love to be able to connect the community. I was talking to people yesterday in Spain, and they were interested, and they would love to be connected with other people who read the book, who have nice stories to share. So I think it's all about building the community.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, and I really appreciate you making some time to be on the show.
Thank you, Ian. I loved it.